Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The sun hung low in the sky, casting its golden glow over the bustling city of Lagos. The sounds of honking cars, street vendors advertising their goods, and the distant rhythm of Afrobeat music painted the usual vibrant picture of the metropolis. In the high-end district of Ikoyi, however, life was quieter, almost regal. Here, gated mansions sat atop sprawling lawns, and luxury cars gleamed in the driveways. One of these mansions belonged to Uchechi Okafor, the youngest billionaire in Nigeria's tech industry. Known for his calculated business moves and innovative ideas, Uche had earned respect both at home and abroad. His wife, Adana, however, was a different story. She was a classic beauty with impeccable fashion sense, but her entitlement and sharp tongue often overshadowed her elegance. This evening, Uche sat in his private study, scrolling through his emails. His well-tailored suit jacket hung on the back of his chair, and his gold cufflinks glinted in the light of the room's crystal chandelier. His phone buzzed, breaking his focus. It was Adana. Uchechi. Adana called from the living room, her voice a mix of impatience and excitement. Did you see the invitation I left on your desk? Uche sighed, knowing exactly what she was referring to. He had seen the envelope earlier, a thick, cream-colored card embossed with gold letters inviting them to a gala hosted by Amaka Egwu, the founder and CEO of the thriving hospitality company Elite Luxe. Amaka's name carried weight, not just for her business success but for her reputation as a no-nonsense leader who had clawed her way to the top without cutting corners. Uche rose and made his way to the living room, where Adana stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking their manicured garden. She was dressed in a flowing red kaftan, her diamond earrings catching the evening light. Her expression was one of determination. "We're going to this gala," she declared, waving the invitation like a royal decree. Uche raised an eyebrow. "I don't think that's a good idea, Adana." "Why not? Everyone who's anyone in Lagos will be there." "I can't miss this," she retorted. "Do you know how much influence I'll gain just by showing up? It's a chance to remind people who I am." "It's not a social competition," Uche replied, his tone measured. "Amaka is a significant figure in my business network. This isn't the kind of event where you make an entrance just to show off." Adana rolled her eyes. "Oh please. How hard can it be to make a good impression on a hotel manager?" Uche's jaw tightened. "Adana, Amaka isn't just its hotel manager. She's a powerhouse. She built Elite Luxe from scratch, and her network includes people you wouldn't dream of meeting. She's not someone you want to cross." But Adana wasn't listening. Her mind was already racing with plans. What she would wear, how she would outshine the other women, and the impression she would leave on Lagos elite. She placed a manicured hand on Uche's shoulder, her tone softening. "Darling, you worry too much. I'll be on my best behavior. Trust me." Uche wasn't convinced, but he nodded, knowing resistance was futile. "Fine. But promise me one thing. Be respectful. Amaka doesn't tolerate arrogance." Adana smiled sweetly, but behind her eyes was a glimmer of defiance. "Of course." The night of the gala arrived quickly. Adana spared no expense in her preparations. She wore a custom-made gown that sparkled with every step, a pair of designer heels, and a diamond necklace that seemed to challenge the stars in brilliance. Uche, on the other hand, opted for a classic black tuxedo, his demeanor understated but commanding. As their chauffeur-driven Bentley glided through the streets of Lagos, Adana couldn't contain her excitement. "I heard Amaka keeps a low profile. That's probably why no one really talks about her. I doubt anyone will even recognize her tonight." Uche gave her a side glance. "Don't underestimate her." They arrived at the venue, a stunning waterfront property in Banana Island, adorned with fairy lights and decorated to perfection. Guests were ushered in by a well-trained staff dressed in crisp uniforms. The air buzzed with the energy of the city's elite. Inside, the ballroom was a vision of opulence. golden chandeliers, silk drapes, and tables set with fine china. Live jazz music played softly in the background, and waiters moved gracefully, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Adana stepped into the room like a queen entering her court. Heads turned, and whispers followed her. She basked in the attention, confident that she was the most important woman in the room. Uche, ever the diplomat, greeted familiar faces and introduced Adana to a few key individuals. She charmed them effortlessly, though her eyes constantly scanned the room for someone she assumed would look like a hostess. Amaka. Is she even here? Adana whispered to Uche. I don't see anyone who looks like a billionaire. Uche's gaze was steady. She's here. Just stay composed. Unbeknownst to Adana, Amaka had been observing them from a distance. She stood by the bar, dressed simply in a tailored encre dress, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Her confidence radiated not from her attire but from the way she carried herself. She preferred to blend in, to listen and watch before making her move. As she sipped her drink, she noticed Adana's extravagant entrance and couldn't help but smile to herself. She had seen women like her before, women who mistook luxury for power, forgetting that true influence lay in substance. Amaka's assistant approached her. Madam, everything is in place. Would you like to address the guests now? Amaka shook her head. Not yet. Let them settle in. I want to see more of our honored guests first. Her eyes flicked to Uche, whom she respected for his business acumen, and then to Adana, whose demeanor already hinted at trouble. Tonight would be interesting. As the evening wore on, Adana grew restless. The waitstaff, though efficient, hadn't brought her drink quickly enough for her liking. She spotted a young woman carrying a tray of champagne flutes and beckoned her with a sharp wave of her hand. You there, bring that over, she called, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The woman approached, her face calm and composed. Adana frowned. The woman wasn't wearing the usual staff uniform, just a simple, elegant dress. Adana didn't care. She reached for a glass, but not before adding, next time, be quicker. You're not being paid to stroll. The woman paused, locking eyes with Adana. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just a quiet confidence that unnerved her. Without a word, the woman handed her the glass and walked away. Uche, who had witnessed the exchange, leaned in. Adana, do you know who that was? No, she replied flippantly, but she could use some training. Uche sighed, running a hand over his face. That's Amaka Egwu, the host. Adana froze, the champagne flute halfway to her lips. Her face flushed with embarrassment, but she quickly masked it with a haughty laugh. You must be joking. I'm not, Uche said firmly. And if I were you, I'd start thinking about how to fix this. For the first time that evening, Adana felt her confidence waver. The sky over Lagos shimmered as the city transitioned from the golden hues of sunset to the star-studded cloak of night. The streets leading to the prestigious Banana Island were unusually calm, as though holding their breath for the grandeur about to unfold. The exclusive gala hosted by Amaka Egwu was the talk of the season, and everyone who mattered in Lagos society had fought for an invitation. The venue was a sprawling estate on the waterfront, its gardens glowing under soft, well-placed lighting. A red carpet stretched from the gate to the entrance, lined with photographers eager to capture the glittering arrivals. Luxury cars purred up the driveway, depositing Lagos elite one by one. A grand entrance. Adanna Okafor stepped out of the Bentley like royalty descending from a golden throne. Her dress, a custom-made creation of shimmering gold fabric, hugged her curves perfectly, its thigh-high slit revealing just enough to make a statement. Her makeup was flawless, and her diamond necklace sparkled as though it carried the essence of the stars themselves. All eyes turned to her. Gasps of admiration followed. Flashes from cameras lit up the night as Adana stood, basking in the moment. She reached for her husband's hand, but Uche, ever reserved, simply nodded toward the entrance. Adana, he murmured as they walked up the carpet, remember what I said. Tonight is about humility and building connections. Adana gave him a dazzling smile. Of course, darling. Leave it to me. As they entered the ballroom, the opulence of the event took Adana's breath away. The space was a masterpiece of design, with golden chandeliers, silk-draped tables, and floral arrangements so intricate they looked like works of art. Waiters dressed in crisp uniforms moved elegantly, offering champagne and trays of hors d'oeuvres. The guests were equally impressive. The women were adorned in couture gowns, and the men in tailored suits that spoke of old money. Adana couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Tonight, she was among her people, and she was determined to shine brighter than anyone else. The unassuming host. Amaka Egwu moved through the room like a quiet current. Her presence felt even if not immediately noticed. Her choice of attire, a simple yet elegant Ankara gown, was a deliberate decision. She believed that power was not in flashy displays but in the ability to command attention with presence alone. And command she did. Amaka was an imposing figure in her own way. Her tall frame and confident posture drew admiration from those who recognized her. Her aura exuded the kind of respect that came from hard work and integrity, traits that set her apart in a world often ruled by inherited wealth. From the bar, she observed her guests. She could immediately tell who was there to network, who came for the spectacle, and who sought to undermine her success. When her eyes fell on Uche and Adana, her lips curved into a slight smile. She had heard of the billionaire couple, particularly Adana's penchant for drama. Tonight promised to be interesting. A misstep in the spotlight. As Adana settled into the crowd, she became restless. The compliments she received upon entering the ballroom had begun to wane, and she noticed that people were paying attention to others, particularly a woman in a striking Ankara dress whom Adana assumed was another guest. She watched as this woman moved through the room, exchanging easy smiles and handshakes. People seemed drawn to her. "Who is that?" Adana whispered to Uche, who was deep in conversation with a tech magnate. Uche followed her gaze and smiled knowingly. "That's Amaka." "Amaka?" Adana repeated, incredulous. "The host?" "Yes," Uche said, his tone carrying a warning. "I told you she's not like the others. She doesn't need to flaunt her wealth. Her achievements speak for her." Adana frowned. "Well, she could have at least dressed the part. She looks like one of the waitresses." Her words hung in the air, and Uche's expression hardened. Before he could respond, Adana turned toward a passing waiter carrying a tray of champagne. "You," she called, her voice sharp. The waiter froze, and so did the woman behind him, Amaka. Adana, mistaking her for staff, extended her hand imperiously. "Bring me one of those drinks. And hurry up next time. This is a gala, not a market stall." A ripple of tension swept through the nearby guests who had overheard. Amaka's eyes locked on Adana, her expression calm but unreadable. Without a word, she stepped forward and handed Adana a glass of champagne. "Of course, madam," she said evenly, her voice betraying none of the irritation she surely felt. Adana, oblivious to the murmurs around her, took the glass with a dismissive wave. "Finally. Some decent service?" Uche, standing frozen beside her, wanted the ground to swallow him whole. The first signs of trouble. As the evening progressed, Adana remained unaware of the damage she had done. She mingled with guests, laughing and flaunting her wealth, while whispers of her interaction with the host began to spread. At one point, a fellow guest, a prominent fashion designer, approached Adana with a thinly veiled smirk. "Adana, you've really outdone yourself tonight." Even Amaka took notice. Adana preened, taking the comment as a compliment. "Well, of course. It's hard not to stand out in a crowd like this." The designer raised an eyebrow but said nothing further, leaving Adana feeling smug. She didn't notice Uche quietly excusing himself to speak with Amaka. A warning unheeded. Uche found Amaka near the bar, speaking with a group of investors. He waited patiently until she noticed him and waved him over. "Ah, Uche," Amaka said warmly, shaking his hand. "Good to see you. And you, thank you for hosting such a beautiful event." She smiled. "It's my pleasure. Though I must admit, tonight has been entertaining." Uche grimaced. "About earlier?" Amaka held up a hand. "Don't apologize for your wife. I've dealt with worse. But Uche, you might want to have a word with her before the night ends." Her words were calm but carried an undertone of seriousness. Uche nodded, feeling a pit of dread in his stomach. When he returned to Adana, she was in the middle of a story about her last shopping spree in Paris. He leaned in close. "Adana," he said quietly, "I need to talk to you." She waved him off. "Not now, Uche." "Adana," he said again, his tone firm. "You've made a mistake tonight, and I need you to fix it." Adana's laughter faded. She turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" "You insulted Amaka," he said bluntly. "The woman you thought was a waitress? That was her." Adana's face paled. "You're joking." "I'm not," Uche said. "And everyone in this room knows it." For the first time that evening, Adana felt a flicker of doubt. Her carefully constructed confidence began to crack. But instead of admitting fault, she straightened her spine. "Well," she said, her voice cold, "if she wanted to be treated like a host, she should have dressed like one." Uche stared at her in disbelief. "Adana, this isn't about appearances. It's about respect. If you don't fix this, it won't just reflect badly on you, it'll reflect on me too." Adana said nothing, her mind racing. She had come to the gala to cement her status among Lagos elite, but now she found herself in a precarious position. The whispers, the glances, the faint smirks, all of it began to weigh on her. As the night wore on, she realized she would have to make a choice, swallow her pride or risk everything. The gala reached its crescendo, the atmosphere humming with energy. The live band transitioned into softer, more soulful melodies, signaling the approach of the keynote speech. Guests began gathering near the stage, their conversations punctuated by the clinking of glasses and murmurs about the evening's host, Amaka Egwu. Adana stood near the center of the ballroom, still reeling from Uche's revelation. Her carefully cultivated confidence had morphed into a simmering cocktail of embarrassment and defiance. She glanced around, noticing how many eyes lingered on her with thinly veiled curiosity. The whispers were growing louder, and though she couldn't hear their words, she felt the weight of their judgment. Uche, standing beside her, leaned in. "Adana, this is your chance. If you approach Amaka now and apologize, you might salvage this." Adana's lips tightened into a thin line. "I didn't do anything wrong, Uche." She should have made her position clear. Uche sighed, his patience fraying. "Adana, stop. This isn't about her attire or her position. It's about respect. You humiliated the host in her own home." "I'll fix it my way," Adana snapped, her voice low but sharp. "Trust me." The keynote speech. The lights dimmed slightly as the event's master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. He was a charismatic man, his voice smooth and commanding. The crowd quieted as he took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his smile broad, "it has been an honor to host you all tonight for this special evening. We are gathered here to celebrate not just excellence, but resilience, innovation, and the spirit of entrepreneurship." Polite applause rippled through the room. "And now," the MC continued, "it is my great pleasure to introduce the woman behind tonight's success, the visionary, the trailblazer, and the CEO of Elite Luxe, Mrs. Amaka Egwu." The room erupted into enthusiastic applause. All eyes turned toward the back of the ballroom as Amaka, calm and composed, made her way to the stage. Her simple Ankara dress now seemed like a deliberate statement, a declaration of authenticity and groundedness in a room filled with glittering opulence. Adana froze, her stomach sinking as the reality of her mistake hit her like a tidal wave. The woman she had dismissed and insulted earlier was now commanding the attention of the most powerful people in Lagos. Uche glanced at her, his expression a mixture of frustration and pity. "I warned you," he muttered. Amaka's address. Amaka stood at the podium, her posture regal yet approachable. The applause slowly died down as she began to speak. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice steady and warm. "Thank you for being here tonight. It means so much to me to see this room filled with such incredible individuals, people who inspire, innovate, and uplift our community." Her words were met with approving nods and smiles. She continued, weaving a story of her journey from humble beginnings to building one of the most respected hospitality brands in the country. She spoke of challenges, perseverance, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their status. Adanna's chest tightened as Amaka's words seemed to hang in the air, directed at her without ever naming her. The message was clear: arrogance had no place in Amaka's world. Toward the end of her speech, Amaka's tone shifted slightly, becoming more personal. "This evening has been a reminder to me," she said, her gaze sweeping the crowd, "that no matter how far we've come, humility and respect are what truly define us. Wealth and power may open doors, but it is our character that keeps them open." The room erupted into applause once more, louder and more enthusiastic than before. Amaka stepped down from the stage, her expression serene, and began making her way back into the crowd. The host and the guest. Adana knew she couldn't avoid Amaka any longer. The host was now the center of attention, and anyone who approached her was guaranteed to be noticed. Adana's instincts told her to retreat, to find a corner and wait for the evening to end. But she also knew that would only fuel the rumors already swirling around her. Uche gave her a pointed look. "This is it, Adana. Go now. Apologize." Swallowing her pride, Adana smoothed her gown and took a deep breath. She made her way toward Amaka, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Mrs. Egwu," she began, her voice hesitant but loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Amaka turned, her expression neutral. "Yes? I wanted to apologize," Adana said, her words faltering. "For earlier. I didn't realize you were the host." The room seemed to hold its breath. Nearby guests pretended not to listen, though their ears were undoubtedly tuned to the exchange. Amaka studied her for a moment, her face unreadable. Then, with a gracious smile, she replied, "I appreciate that, Mrs. Okafor. It's important to acknowledge misunderstandings." Adana felt a flicker of relief, but Amaka wasn't finished. However, Amaka continued, her tone firm but kind, "It's not about who I am or what title I hold. It's about how we treat people regardless of their roles. Respect is not something we reserve for those we deem important. It's something we extend to everyone." The word struck Adana like a hammer. She forced a smile and nodded, but inside, she felt exposed and small. The crowd dispersed, sensing that the confrontation had ended, and Amaka turned her attention to another guest. The aftermath. For the rest of the evening, Adana stayed by Uche's side, her confidence shattered. She avoided eye contact with anyone who had witnessed her earlier behavior, feeling their silent judgment. Uche, though frustrated, offered her a lifeline. "Adana," he said softly, "this isn't the end. You made a mistake, but you can learn from it. Tonight, you've seen what true power and grace look like. Take it as a lesson." Adana didn't respond, but his words lingered in her mind. She had come to the gala expecting to be the star, but instead, she had been humbled. For the first time in a long while, she realized that her arrogance had cost her more than just a moment of embarrassment. It had tarnished her reputation. As the evening drew to a close, Adana couldn't help but glance at Amaka one last time. The host was surrounded by admirers, her laugh genuine and her presence magnetic. She was everything Adana wanted to be but had failed to embody. And for the first time, Adana wondered if she had the strength to change. The morning after the gala was quiet in the Okafor mansion. The usual hum of activity was replaced by a tense stillness that hung in the air like a storm cloud. Adana sat at the marble breakfast table, her perfectly manicured fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. The events of the previous evening played on a loop in her mind, each moment more humiliating than the last. She glanced at her phone, which buzzed incessantly with messages. Social media was already abuzz with snippets of the gala, photos of the glamorous guests, and, to her dismay, whispers of the scene she had caused. The social media frenzy. Adana hesitated before opening Instagram. The first post that greeted her was from a popular gossip page. A video clip showed her interaction with Amaka, accompanied by a caption that read, "When the wife of a billionaire forgets her manners, Adanna Okafor mistakes Amaka Egwu for a waitress and learns the hard way who's really in charge. #respect goes both ways #gala drama." The comments were brutal. "Money doesn't buy class, clearly. How do you insult the host of the party? Embarrassing. This is why I stan Amaka, grace under pressure." Adana's cheeks burned. She tossed the phone aside, her appetite for breakfast long gone. The conversation. Uche entered the dining room, his expression unreadable. He was dressed casually in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, but his usual air of calm was tinged with frustration. He sat across from Adana, pouring himself a cup of coffee without speaking. After a long silence, he finally broke it. "Adana, we need to talk." She looked up, her defenses already rising. "About what?" "About last night. About how you managed to insult the most important person in the room and make both of us the subject of every conversation in Lagos this morning." Adana bristled. "I apologized to her, didn't I?" "Barely," Uche shot back, his voice firm. "And it wasn't just about you. Do you realize the damage this could do to my business relationships? Amaka is more than just a social figure. She's influential in ways you clearly don't understand." Adana's lips trembled. "I didn't mean to insult her. I didn't know who she was." "That's the point," Uche said, his tone softening slightly. "You shouldn't need to know someone's title to treat them with respect. This arrogance of yours, it's not sustainable." The words stung. Adana had always prided herself on her confidence and ability to command attention, but now it felt like those traits were working against her. The media fallout. By midday, the story had spread beyond Lagos. Online articles dissected the incident, turning it into a cautionary tale about arrogance and entitlement. Even traditional newspapers picked it up, framing the narrative as a clash between old money and new wealth. Adana's phone rang incessantly with calls from friends, most of whom were more interested in gossip than offering genuine support. She ignored them all, retreating to her room to avoid the growing sense of shame. Meanwhile, Uche was already working to repair the damage. He reached out to Amaka's office, arranging a private meeting to apologize formally and ensure their business relationship remained intact. Amaka's perspective. At her office in Victoria Island, Amaka sat at her sleek desk, scrolling through the day's headlines. The incident with Adana was being discussed everywhere, but she remained unfazed. She had dealt with worse during her rise to success. Her assistant entered with a cup of tea. "Madam, Mr. Okafor has requested a meeting with you." Amaka raised an eyebrow. "Uche?" "Yes, ma'am. He said he'd like to discuss last night's event." Amaka nodded thoughtfully. "Schedule it for tomorrow. Let's see what he has to say." Her assistant hesitated. "And Mrs. Okafor?" "She sent flowers this morning with a note of apology." Amaka's lips curved into a faint smile. "Interesting. Keep the flowers in the lobby. As for the apology, actions speak louder than words." The social fallout. Adana's social circle wasn't kind to her in the days following the gala. Lunch invitations dwindled, and the whispers during social gatherings grew louder. Even her closest friends offered thinly veiled criticisms. "Adana, you really need to be more careful," one friend said during a boutique visit. "You don't want people thinking you're ungracious." Adana bit back a retort, choosing instead to focus on the racks of designer clothes. But deep down, she felt the sting of their judgment. A lesson from Uche. One evening, as they sat on the terrace overlooking their expansive garden, Uche decided it was time for a deeper conversation. "Adana," he began, "do you remember where I started? Before the money, before the success?" She nodded hesitantly. "Yes, you've told me about it. You started with nothing. And do you remember what my mother always said?" Uche continued. Adana looked away, uncomfortable with where the conversation was heading. "She said respect and humility will take you further than money." Uche nodded. "Exactly. And it's true. People like Amaka didn't get where they are because of wealth. They got there because they earned respect through their character and their actions. That's why last night hurt me so much. It wasn't just about business. It was about what we stand for as people." Adana swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to embarrass you, Uche." "I know," he said, his voice softening. "But you need to think about what kind of person you want to be. You have the power to build others up or tear them down. Choose wisely." A chance for redemption. That night, Adana couldn't sleep. Uche's words echoed in her mind, forcing her to confront truths she had long ignored. Her arrogance had alienated people, but it wasn't too late to change. She decided to take action, not just to repair her relationship with Amaka but to transform herself. She made a list of philanthropic organizations and started researching ways to give back to the community. If Amaka's story was one of resilience and humility, perhaps Adana could learn from her example. The next morning, she picked up her phone and called Uche. "I want to do something meaningful," she said. "Not just for appearances, for real." Uche's voice held a note of surprise but also pride. "That's a good start, Adana. Let's talk about how." Adana didn't know if she could undo all the damage she had caused, but for the first time, she was willing to try. And that willingness, she realized, was the first step toward becoming the woman she truly wanted to be. The days following the gala marked the beginning of a transformation in Adanna Okafor. The arrogance that once defined her demeanor had given way to introspection, and for the first time, she questioned the life she had built around wealth and superficial status. The fallout from the gala had been a harsh wake-up call, and Adana was determined to change, not just to repair her reputation, but to find a deeper sense of purpose. The step toward humility. Adana sat in her home office, a room she rarely used except to coordinate her shopping trips or social calendar. Today, however, it was a hub of activity. The desk was covered in brochures from various charitable organizations, research notes, and a notebook where she had scribbled ideas. Uche entered, a curious expression on his face. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to the mess on the desk. Adana looked up, a faint smile on her lips. "I've been thinking about what you said. About respect, humility, and using what we have to make a difference." Uche's brow lifted in surprise. "And I want to start giving back," Adana said firmly. "Not just writing checks, but actually getting involved. I've been looking into mentorship programs for young women in business. I think I could help." Uche smiled, his pride evident. "That's a great idea, Adana. Let me know how I can support you." For the first time in years, Adana felt a genuine sense of excitement, not for a gala or a designer purchase, but for something meaningful. The second meeting with Amaka. Determined to make amends, Adana requested a private meeting with Amaka. She wanted to apologize sincerely, without the pressure of an audience or the lingering whispers of the gala. Amaka agreed, though she remained cautious. The meeting was set at one of Elite Luxe's boutique hotels in Victoria Island, a modest but elegant venue that reflected Amaka's values of quality and authenticity. Adana arrived early, dressed simply in a sleek black dress and minimal jewelry. She sat in the lounge, nervously sipping a glass of water as she rehearsed her words. When Amaka walked in, exuding her usual calm confidence, Adana stood and extended her hand. "Thank you for meeting me," Adana began, her voice steady despite her nerves. Amaka shook her hand and sat down. "Of course. I was curious to hear what you had to say." Adana took a deep breath. "I want to apologize again, properly this time. My behavior at the gala was unacceptable. I let my arrogance get the better of me, and I disrespected you in your own home. It was wrong and I'm truly sorry." Amaka studied her for a moment, her expression softening. "I appreciate your apology, Adana. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. I've also been reflecting on what you said," Adana continued, "about respect and humility. It hit me harder than I expected, and it's made me realize how much I need to change." Amaka nodded. "Change isn't easy, but it's always worth it. The real question is, what will you do with this realization?" Adana hesitated, then said, "I want to be more than just a socialite. I've started researching ways to mentor young women and support local entrepreneurs. I'd like to learn from people like you, who've built something meaningful." A genuine smile spread across Amaka's face. "That's a good start. If you're serious about this, I'd be happy to mentor you." Adana's eyes widened in surprise. "Really?" "Yes," Amaka said. "But I won't go easy on you. If you're ready to put in the work, I'll guide you." Adana nodded, gratitude swelling in her chest. "I'm ready." A new beginning. With Amaka's guidance, Adana began volunteering at local women's empowerment initiatives. She spent time mentoring young women who dreamed of starting their own businesses, sharing lessons she had learned, both from her successes and her mistakes. The work was challenging, but it was also rewarding. Adana found herself growing in ways she hadn't expected. She learned to listen, to empathize, and to appreciate the struggles of others. Slowly but surely, she began to shed the image of the entitled billionaire's wife and forge a new identity as a compassionate and driven woman. The public's reaction. Word of Adanna's transformation spread, and while some were skeptical, many were impressed by her efforts. Social media posts showcased her mentoring sessions, community projects, and collaborations with local entrepreneurs. She no longer sought validation through designer clothes or extravagant parties. Instead, she found fulfillment in making a difference. Even her old social circle began to take notice. Some distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the new Adana, but others admired her growth. "She's changed," one of her former friends admitted during a luncheon. "I didn't think she had it in her, but she's proving me wrong." A stronger partnership. Adanna's transformation also had a profound impact on her relationship with Uche. The tension that had once defined their marriage began to dissipate as they found common ground in their shared desire to make a positive impact. One evening, as they sat together on their terrace, Adana turned to Uche and said, "Thank you." "For what?" he asked, surprised. "For pushing me to see what I couldn't see," she said. "I didn't realize how empty my life was until I started filling it with purpose." Uche smiled, taking her hand. "I'm proud of you, Adana. You've come a long way." The final reflection. Months later, at another gala, this one hosted by a charitable foundation, Adana found herself in a similar setting to the one that had changed her life. But this time, she was different. She didn't seek the spotlight or try to outshine anyone else. Instead, she mingled with guests, genuinely interested in their stories and ideas. As the evening wore on, she noticed Amaka across the room. Their eyes met, and Amaka gave her a small nod of approval. Adana smiled, feeling a sense of pride, not in her wealth or status, but in the person she was becoming. She had learned that true power wasn't about dominance or display. It was about character, integrity, and the ability to uplift others. And as she stood in that room, surrounded by people who now saw her not as an arrogant wife but as a woman of substance, she knew she was finally on the right path. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.